Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast, and welcome to 2023. I am so excited to be kicking off this year with an incredible guest. So every year, if you have been listening to our show for a while, we always try to get somebody that's really inspiring to help us jumpstart the new year. We know that the new year can be a great kind of clean page slate for many of us, but it can also be really overwhelming. And so I try to get somebody to kind of catapult us into like action and motivation and really just bring some perspective as we embark on this next chapter. And so this episode will not disappoint. So my guest today is Jen Hatmaker. So if you don't know who Jen is, she is the host of the uber popular podcast For the Love. She's a New York Times bestselling author of books like For the Love, of Mess and Moxie, Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire. Actually, she has her debut cookbook, which was released a few months ago, called Feed These People. And she's a mom to a bunch of kids and has this incredible community. Again, if you don't know who she is, incredible community of women that she spearheads all across the globe. And I thought, who better to have on our show to start off the new year right than somebody who I respect and admire, and I know so many of my listeners do as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the podcast mic to Jen Hatmaker. Welcome, Jen, to the show.
That is a really nice, overstated introduction. I will appreciate your hyperbole and accept it. Thank you for such a kind welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, again, a lot of our people are followers of you and your work, but there are some people that might live under a rock, no shame, and might not know a little bit about you. So in addition to kind of what I said, and the one thing I forgot to mention, which is a really big thing, and we're going to touch on it, is Jen's an Enneagram junkie like me. She's a 3.
That's fun. I dedefinitely want to talk about that today.
Yeah. That is, it's on my list. Don't you worry. That's
don't you worry
on my list. But for those who might not be familiar with you, in your own words, why don't you just kind of fill in the blanks of what you'd like them to know?
Right. Let's see. I live here in Austin, Texas. I've been here for almost 25 years. So this is definitely home. And I have 5 kids. I always feel like I need to lead with that because it's so obnoxious. Most of them are young adults. I've got one left in high school. She's a junior, but she's actually doing her junior year abroad in Spain. And so I am empty nesting right now for the first time ever. I got married when I was 19 and I had my first kid when I was 23. So nobody lives here. Like my 4th kid is a freshman in college and it's just crazy. And by crazy, I mean awesome. So don't get it twisted. I'm like,
I loved empty nesting. I have a 19 and a 22-year-old, and everyone's like, "Are you so sad?" And I'm like, "Listen, don't get me wrong. I miss my kids, but no."
Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah. So, and we were younger.
I parented for so long.
Yeah, and we were kind of young empty nesters too, and we were like, we've always had kids, like all that we knew. We didn't so.
Right. I handed over all of my 20s to marriage and young motherhood. I had all 3 of my biological kids in my 20s, and then our youngest 2 are adopted. And so I'm like you, I always assumed that I would finally get to this stage where I would be kind of a young empty nester. I'm in my upper 40s. And then it would be like, oh, we've done it. We've done the thing. Now it's our prize. I got divorced though 2 years ago, surprisingly, shockingly, after 26 years.
plot twist.
Major plot twist right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so that has really changed the story dramatically, absolutely dramatically. And so I am empty nesting, but I'm the only person who lives here and I didn't see that one coming. But that is a whole thing. And that's been a whole journey of like recovery and healing and rebuilding, which has been hard and tragic, but also like beautiful and surprising. So you get all of it. That's how life goes. And so I'm an author, as you mentioned, and I podcaster, and I host a big book club, and I speak and I travel. I don't know. I love life. I love my work. I'm all the time surprised that this is the work I get to do in the world. And I love my community of women, and it's just a real joy to me. And so as long as people keep coming around, I'm going to keep doing this. And it's just like a delight to me. And so that's it. That's my deal in a nutshell. I don't know.
No,
I left some stuff out. I don't know why. I don't know what's left.
I'm here for all of it. And again, my people either know you and they're like, oh my gosh, we love her. Or they're like, wait, who is she? And I'm like, you would love her. I'm like, you would love her. So now you need to go find her. So for all of my people that are not currently fans of yours, you're welcome, people. Go find her.
That's cute. I love it.
All right. So obviously you said, you've gone through a lot of transitions in your life recently too, within the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I think as we get older, regardless of your plot twist or not, like our resolutions, our goals, like how we see the start to a new year changes and evolves. And I guess I'm just wondering, right now in this season of your life, like how do you feel like it's different from maybe years past in terms of how you're approaching like the year ahead?
I think probably, to be fair, I'd have to start by saying I've never been a super strong New Year's resolution type. Simply because they wouldn't stick for me. Like I had a hard time getting them to work. And I think it's because I'd put a lot of pressure on them. Like, we're going to get there, but I'm an Enneagram 3. And so I like things to succeed. And so I would put a lot of like high goals on my resolutions. In some cases, really hard to reach, or the pace was too fast, or I expected success too soon. And so having those falter, over the years, what I do now in terms of resolution is a little bit kinder. It's a little bit more gentle, and frankly, a little bit more realistic. First of all, New Year's Day is just a day. It's not magic. It's not a magic day where we become a person we've never been. Like whoever you were on December 31st is who you are on January 1st. So let's go there. But I think that what I appeal to the one resolution that I've ever really kept and that really stuck, which was when my kids were little. And I remember waking up on January 1st and just thinking, okay, look, I'm not going to be a new human being. I'm not going to go from working out 0 to working out 6 days in Orange Theory. I'm just not. That's not what happens just because it's a new month. Like, what makes sense? What is a tiny little incremental change I would like to make this year? Just something I'd maybe like to do slightly better. I mean, the stakes were low. I didn't put any like rigid rules around it. And what I picked was cooking. I didn't know how to cook. I never really learned. I was disastrous in the kitchen. And I was just like, well, hell, these people have to eat every day. And so what if I decided just to do a teeny bit better? What if I decided to like cooking? So I wasn't even like, maybe I could become a chef, or maybe I can become what I was just like, I wonder if it's possible for me to start liking cooking, since I have to do it every day and I'm pissed all the time and I feel resentful toward kindergartners.
Yes.
And so I did. So that year I was just like, because I wasn't trying to hit some like impossible goal or like overturn my entire personality, I was just like, what would you have to do to like this more? That I could do. So I'm like, oh, and it stuck. I mean, it really stuck, as you can see.
Well, I think that in and of itself is so wise. And again, you were in your 20s. So like that's a pretty wise statement for somebody that was young and in the weeds with everything to just reframe it, because it's really a mindset shift of saying,
totally.
you know, as opposed to looking at it, all of these like tactics, I have to do step this, step that, you were just kind of were like, how can I reframe how I'm looking at this?
Absolutely.
And I think for that right there is so important, whether it's cooking or decluttering or working out or getting your finances in check or whatever that it is that you're trying to change. That subtle, like just little tweak, that little pivot a couple degrees is what was the catalyst, I think, for you then. And I look at you, you're a cookbook author.
I think this is an important way to restructure the whole idea, because generally resolutions are located in some degree of like a negative self-assessment. Like, I need to make this change because I am terrible / lazy / undisciplined or whatever in this area. And so it's like a punishing mindset. And there's a switch to think, I would like to make this change because I deserve happiness or joy or health or balance in this area. Like, I want not I need to do better because I'm the worst, but I'd like to make this change because I deserve the best. Like for me, it wasn't, I'm going to start cooking because I'm garbage at it and it sucks that I have to do this every day. Rather, it was, since I'm going to do this every day, I wonder if I can like it. Is there something I can change so that this becomes enjoyable to me? It was a completely different idea, and it changed everything for me. And so I try to approach changes like that. Like, this is something I deserve and want, and reach for like that positive side of it instead of just like a punishing, I'm the worst mindset.
I love it. I think that right there is going to be very huge for a lot of people because of the way they look at it. And I also like what you said about the resolutions almost seeing like a punishment or an obligation, right? Yeah. Like, I have to do this. And, you know, obviously I talk about organization and clutter, and people think, you know, that there's a right time to do something, and again, this can apply to, well, I'll watch what I'm eating after the holidays, or I'll budget after this, or I'll declutter when my kids go to school. And we all know that there is no magic time for any of these things.
That's right.
It's just, how can you be the best version of yourself in the season that you're in? Whether that means that you're at home with a bunch of kids, or, you know, you're working 3 jobs, or whatever the situation is. And I think it's really important, but people tend to put this, this weight on themselves at the beginning of the year of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to be different this year? And I think it is an opportunity for you to say, okay, how can I embark on this next chapter being the best version of myself, but without the negative pressure that people trying to keep up. What about in your community? Because obviously you lead a community of millions of women. You talk to people all the time. What are you hearing from the people out there? Where do you feel like they're struggling these days? Well, or where do they feel like they need some more guidance and nurturing?
Obviously, this many women are not a monolith. We're kind of all over the place. But if I were to try to find kind of the median experience, the longer I do my work, my community is growing with me and aging with me. And so I'm 48. And so my community is also getting older with me. So a lot of us are kind of here in our 40s, more or less. That's kind of in the middle. I've got older and I've got younger, but that's sort of where the bulk of us are. And so I noticed our communal conversations changing from 10 years ago. Obviously, 10 years ago, we were in the thick of the thing, like in the raising kids years and in the just the melee of it all. And it's interesting now that we're a little bit older, what I hear from the community is that we are discovering that we have less and less capacity for BS. So some of the things that maybe would have really hindered us a decade ago, like, oh, I just can't get this right, or I want to do this better, or I feel like I'm failing at this, or we're a little bit kinder to ourselves now than we were 10 years ago. We also understand, having done a lot of those things, and we're almost on the other side or all the way on the other side, going, oh no, parenting is just hard because it's hard. It's not because we're doing it wrong. It's not because our kids are particularly dysfunctional. I mean, they all are. Like, that's just what it is. Like, we were doing the best we could. And so I think we have graduated from this narrative that we are supposed to be pitch perfect at everything we touch. I believed that in my 20s, and I was still going for it in my 30s. But in my 40s, I'm like, oh, that was trash from the beginning. That was a bad narrative, and that was never true, and it was never going to be true, and it never could be true. And so I think where I'm at now is where a lot of my community is at now, which is less, how can I be better, and more, how can I be kinder to myself?
I love that.
To my community, to my family, to my friends, to other women, to the girls that we're raising. Like, how can I be a little bit more gentle and be really the voice in my head I wish I was 10 years ago?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a couple years older than you. And you think 40s, just wait till you hit 50. And then you're just
I love to hear it.
I am all about grace. Like, everything is, I no joke. I had it before this call. I was on with my therapist, and we're planning a big family trip. Well, at the time this airs, I'll be on my trip. And I said, it's the first time the four of us have been away, just the four of us, since my girls were in 8th and 6th grade. Like, we've been away with other people, but like just a family trip.
Nice.
And with everybody's schedules, and I said, she's like, are you excited? And I said, I'm excited. And I'm a little nervous because we've got young adults and different personalities. And I'm going to have a pep talk with everybody before we go about the key word is grace with everybody. Like, just, we're all doing the best we can.
That's right.
And that's it. So that's kind of my.
And turns out that's enough. Like, if we're willing to let that be enough, not just for ourselves, but for each other, when we just go, all right, failure's baked into the sauce. Like, I'm going to have it. You're going to have it. We're going to have it. There is not 100% mark that any of us are going to hit, not personally, not relationally, not interpersonally, not as a family. Like, good enough is good enough. And when we start applying that metric to our own selves, which I think this is the hardest place to apply it, then it becomes easier to apply to other people. And so we're able to just take the whole thing down a notch. Let's just bring it out of the rafters of just white knuckling everything to damn death. Like, we've just got to get this exactly right, and failure is disastrous. And it just really isn't. Like, life is pretty sloppy, and it's pretty untidy. And so I really like a compassionate outlook on our own stories, and then the ones that we're building with the people around us. I think that's the better way to live. And it's a real relief. I mean, whoa, the way I was going for perfection in my 30s and 20s. Oh, wow, how exhausted. I was so tired. I almost can't remember whole years.
Yeah.
Like, just fuzzy and foggy, like lost into the abyss of just effort.
Well, and a lot of people wind up, that turns into resentment also, because you're like, I am doing this. I am keeping a perfect house. I am doing all of these things, and you're not appreciating it, or it's going unnoticed, and so we're doing things for the wrong reasons. We're chasing the wrong goal at the end of the day, which leads me, I think this is a perfect segue. Let's talk about the Enneagram. Because I think you and I when did you first start learning about the Enneagram? Was it like 2017-ish?
That feels about right. I feel like I'm 5 solid years into it, maybe a little bit more. But it gets you, it grabs you by the tail, and it hangs on. And so now it's just so obnoxious. I'm dating a man.
Yes.
And he's just like, nobody loves the Enneagram like white women. He's Black. I'm like, I know, we love it. And like, I make him care about it. And he's like, oh my God, I just can't.
What's his Enneagram type?
He's a 7.
He is. Okay. And so,
yeah, he's fun.
So that's good. I mean, and 3s and 7s get along.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
So that's, that's good. So.
And what are you?
I'm an 8.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm an 8.
I've been mistyped as an 8 several times.
Well, when I because I listened to you when I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense that she's a 3.
Mhm.
My husband's a 3. So I have done a lot of learning about 3s.
Yeah.
So, and I have a 4 and a 9 daughter. So I've got So I've got 2 girls that are in the withdrawing stance.
Totally.
And with 2 aggressive parents.
Oh my gosh, you sure do.
So we made a lot of parenting like
really
missteps. And so you talk about trying to do the best you can. And I say, I just wish I knew the Enneagram when my kids were little. And for anybody that's listening, I would think any of our listeners know about the Enneagram because we've done Enneagram and Clutter series. But if you're brand new, Enneagram's personality typology, it looks at your unconscious motivation rather than your behavior. So basically why you do what you do. And there's 9 different core types, and we all see the world through a different lens, which kind of leads into, we show up in the world kind of in a certain way, but not everybody else sees the world through the same lens as us.
Right.
And as 3s, as the achiever, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's, image is important. Yep. Achievement's important. Yes. All of that validation's important. And me as an 8, I'm all about justice, championing the underdog. And so that's my thing. And, I think it's been really, for me, it's been really transformational in that whole grace piece, because holding people to a standard where my husband was like, people are always going to disappoint you because you're holding them to an unrealistic standard. And I think for so many people, that's how they are. And I'm wondering, I want to hear a little bit about your Enneagram kind of journey and how you've incorporated it into your life, other than it just being a fun party game.
Yeah, it's really, boy, when you first sort of pull up a seat to the Enneagram table, it is disorienting because they read your mail. I mean, it is specific. And I remember when I was first sort of studying my type, I'm like, oh no, now everybody's on to me. Like, I thought these were little thoughts I was keeping tucked away that nobody really knew, or that I was hiding, or camouflaging. But yeah, the secret's out. So a 3, just like any number, the nice thing about the Enneagram is there's no hierarchy here. It's not like one number's better than another. It's not like any number's bad. There's wonderful things about every single person on the Enneagram spectrum. Every number has something so wonderful to offer the world, and they're set themselves. So I like that. I like coming from that approach. But having said that, you're onto yourself when you read your type when it is disintegrating. And then you're like, oh, there I am. There I am for sure. Because a lot of us can identify with probably several of the top parts of some of the numbers. And some of us we rank high in more than one number. So we're not super narrow. There's a lot of crossover in the Enneagram, but that underbelly of it, like, oh no, there I am. I found my number. And so I've always been highly motivated by achievement, by awards, by being the best at a thing, or being thought of as the best at a thing. Either way, those are interchangeable. And so obviously this has a clear downside. It can create a really good leader. The 3 tends to be a really highly energetic, highly positive, ambitious and motivated leader. So there's a place where a healthy 3 brings everybody up with them. But that dark side is so disproportionately in need of approval. And so that's been the work of my adult life, is to resist my instinct to please, to be a people pleaser, and to function and make choices based on what other people think of them. I mean, that obviously can be such a pit of disaster. And so I'm very, very self-aware. That's the good news. The Enneagram actually helps you be self-aware if you'll let it.
100%.
So I'm really aware of my tendencies, and I notice when they come up, and I'm able to like see them and observe them and just say, is this true or not true? Is this the right choice or not the right choice? Like, what are you motivated by here? And so I'm able to catch it a lot more now than I was earlier when I just operated on it, frankly, subconsciously. That was just what I thought the world was. That was my worldview. Assumed everybody else's was too. So when it wasn't, I thought they were wrong and it was right. Which that's why I get mistyped as an 8 a lot. I have a really strong justice North Star. And so I have friends. Ian Cron is convinced I'm an 8.
Really?
Yes. And I'm just like, I am telling you that I am a 3 with a very strong heart for justice. I promise. But he's like, the way that you operate as a 3, you have disrupted your social status so many times. You have made choices that got you kicked out of your group.
Well, for sure. I was, yes. And so you definitely are but that's why I love about the Enneagram is that it's a both and, it's not an either or.
That's right. That's right. And we're not locked into a prison of our type. It doesn't mean that we're incapable of choosing something against our instinct or going outside of our sort of rhythms and patterns. Like, we're able to look at something and make a different choice outside of what is expected or traditional in our space. But it is pretty telling. And so it's very interesting right now being in a like relationship with a 7, who that's really what I wanted to be. Did you ever want to be a different number than you are? I wanted to be a 7.
So I actually, once I learned my type, I felt the sigh of relief because for anyone that knows, there's a lot of negative connotations associated with specifically women 8s. And I am a textbook social 8. I am the textbook. I'm an 8 with an 8 wing. Like that's how 8 I am. Yeah. And it serves me well until it doesn't, right.
Same here for 3s.
And so if I were to be any other number, it would be a 9.
Do you access your 9 wing? Like I do. The older you get?
Yes. The older I get, I feel like, and I don't know if it's a combination of the awareness of the Enneagram in conjunction with maturity and hopefully some wisdom. I don't think I think I probably would have seen the 9 wing in me as weak when I was younger. And definitely when I look back, I was like I moved to New York without a job and just was like, I'll waitress and make money. And like, I had a lot of 7 things when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, okay, again, was I just young and naive and go, I'll figure it out. Like, did it show up that way? But I definitely try to intentionally lean into my 9 wing because I feel like it makes me a better version of myself.
That's really good. I find that's really interesting development the older we get. I'm a very strong 3, but my wing has always very shown up as a 2.
I was going to say you probably have a really big 2 wing.
Strong helper instinct. But as I get a little bit older, I do notice some of that, and you would deeply understand a 4 because you're parenting one. I see some of the 4 coming out of me, like, which is really different energy for me, very different energy from my 3-2.
Yes, it is.
And so it's a little bit of touch of melancholy as I get a little bit older, and a little bit more precious than I have been before. And so I think it's great. I love that we have access to sort of different components of our personality, and that it kind of comes out the older we get. I think that makes us a little bit more well-rounded and not quite so on the nose like we probably were 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you, so just to give you a quick overview. So when I first started learning about the Enneagram, I was like gobbling it up like you were. I went to see Suzanne in Dallas at conferences and did all these things. And I started doing research, or I started asking questions about, well, where's the connection with people's relationship with clutter? Because I talk about, and they're like, and I started like Googling it, looking for it. I was talking to Laura on her team, and she's like, I don't think we have anything. And I was like, Well, we're going to develop that. So I basically have spent the past 5 years developing this framework, looking at how each type relates to clutter and different types of clutter.
Interesting.
So that's my like geeky project that I've been doing. And so we've been interviewing people of all different Enneagram types to kind of see where are through lines, where are people different, and what's some common themes between all the different types. So I talk about, so I'm going to ask you where you kind of fall. So I talk about 3 types of clutter. Physical clutter, obvious stuff, right? Laundry, dishes, clothes. Then we talk about emotional clutter, which is like guilt, fear, either like sentimental stuff. My kid made this for me, or I spent a lot of money on it, so I can't get rid of it. Emotional stuff, or calendar clutter being not being able to say no, always saying yes to things, or not using your time wisely. So those are the 3 main buckets that we talk about here. So I'm curious for you, which one, if there's one that you think kind of stands out to you as being more dominant for you?
It's funny, I haven't thought of this through my Enneagram lens, but this feels on brand for a 3.
Yes.
I do not have a lot of physical clutter. I don't love it. I am not sentimental. I do not have a lot of sentimental clutter at all. I will get rid of stuff. I get rid of it constantly. This very day, I just rented an industrial sized dumpster that's on the other side of this office wall, so I can just throw everything away. If it's not bolted down, it's going. I am not sentimental. And where I have clutter, if I have it, which I do, is calendar clutter. Because for a 3, if it's on my calendar, this is outward facing stuff. This is the work I do. This is the buckets that I fill as a leader, as a speaker, as a teacher, as a podcaster, as a social media person. And so that is where I allow way more clutter in than is responsible. Not surprising. Has to do with my career.
And again, it just further validates my research. So, and you touched on something which is very common for 3. See, and this was a huge point in my marriage, especially when my kids were younger. Josh, that's my husband, would come home and immediately start picking stuff up. And I would interpret that as like, I'm not doing a good job. You don't think I'm keeping a clean house or an organized house. And he just has a visceral reaction to physical clutter around. And I'm just like, and obviously, like, this is what I do for a living, but and I was like, I'll get to it. But he will immediately just start throwing stuff away, putting stuff away, shoving it away, because he cannot, it's almost like like he's got hives. And I didn't understand that. And he had trouble articulating it. But when I started learning about the Enneagram and talking to other 3s, that was a common thing. And I'm wondering if that resonates with you.
I mean, it must, because I just have like all my spaces inside are pretty much empty. Like I like clean lines. I don't like stuff everywhere. When I do have stuff everywhere, I'm in this like low simmering anxious place. Sometimes I can't even locate it. I just know I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I can't get clear thoughts. And so, as you can imagine, building a life with 5 kids,
well, I thought
2 decades was, I spent a great deal of time just being like, pick your freaking stuff. Like, oh my gosh, like, really being controlling around some of that. And it just made when my space is cluttered, my mind is cluttered. They absolutely go together.
Yeah, I feel that way too. But I see the 3s, it really sinks in, where other types like 9s, for example, and I'm stereotyping here. So this is not everybody, but by and large, I call 9s clutter blind. Like they can just walk, it just doesn't stress them out. Like they can just go and if there's stuff around, and it's just like, it's fine. They're just kind of chill. It doesn't get to them. My daughter, who's a 4, sometimes she doesn't like a lot of clutter, but she likes stuff. She likes stuff surrounding her because it
Mm.
elicits the feelings and the memories, and it's
Mhm.
all heavy. And so, you know, for me, I'm just way more, and this is, I think, also as I get older, more minimalistic. Like, I don't want as much stuff. It's more stuff I have to think about, clean, deal with, do.
Yeah.
And you have certain types that just are really attracted to it. And so I
Yeah.
can imagine in a house with 5 kids, you're going to have different personality types with different things, and
Uh-huh.
it's going to play
Uh-huh.
itself in.
Uh-huh. I've really had to work on that because um 2 of my kids, but one particularly my youngest, her attachment to stuff is outsized. And this is a variety of reasons. I think some of it's literally personality, like it is for a lot of us. And some of hers is a trauma response. And so I have to like train myself to let her have her space. And just to be like, she's not doing it wrong. Like I walk into her room and I'm just like, I cannot look at this. It upsets me. It's created a lot of friction between us. But for her, having her little things all around her is wildly comforting. And it makes her feel like in control of something and secure. No one's going to take her stuff from her. And so the Enneagram has actually been a tool to help me know that my way is my way, but it's not the best way. And other people have different motivations for what I would look at and go, you're a mess. But that's my assessment of the thing. Hers is more like, these are my things and they're precious to me. This is my space and it speaks of me. Like our motivations are different. And so I've had to just decide in my world, your room, your space. I'm not going to pick this. I'm going to lay this one down. I'll pick other things, but this is not the one I'm going to pick.
Yeah. And we've had similar conversations in our house because it would stress my husband out tremendously, specifically. And I was like, there are boundaries. Like we don't live in Grey Gardens, so there cannot be like cereal bowls laying around. We don't want any like feral animals. But if you want stuff, we would have some boundaries. The one thing that we learned, I started practicing this, and especially it came into fruition really with learning the Enneagram, is allowing the appropriate amount of space for people to make decision making when it comes to reducing their stuff and clutter and making those decisions. Because a 3 and 8, we're quick processors, right? We know what we want, we know what we don't want, and we get rid of it. Other types on the Enneagram really have to weigh so many things, whether it's through self-doubt, whether they have to go through emotional response. And so I know, and even though my 19-year-old daughter has been drinking this Kool-Aid with me since her whole life, a task that might take me 5 minutes is going to take her a half an hour.
Totally.
So I don't rush it. Me rushing and saying, just make a decision. Do you want it? Do you not want it? Are you going to get rid of it? That is nerve-wracking for her and becomes counterproductive. And so just holding that space for your daughter is, and just giving her like, if it does come to a point where like, we need to make some decisions because, you know, your dresser's crying, like it can't handle any more clutter.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I have 100% steered us into the most unproductive waters around this. And so it just doesn't work. I mean, I can shove and shove and shove, but all she's going to do is shut down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is true that we process differently. We perceive things differently. We have different motivations. It's really monumental knowledge to accept that our way is not right, or it's not right or wrong. It's just different.
Yep.
Because I've always wanted to assign wrong to everybody else's choices that did not like jump through my hoops.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. So, okay. So tell our listeners, because again, we could talk Enneagram all day. We could talk about all these things. What are some, words of wisdom that you want to be able to share with our people as we embark on this again? Not that you're not the same person as you were 3 days ago, but as we're starting 2023, what do you want our listeners to take away? Give them some nuggets.
Yeah, sometimes I can get real trapped in the short term perception and what is right in front of my face. And to whatever degree that it's super close, it means I can't quite see it clearly. I'm a little too close to it. Therefore, I either over obsess or I over relate or I overthink. And so one thing that has served me well, and I think this bears mentioning at this time of year when we're generally kind of in the short term thinking, what about this year? Because frankly, this one year is short term. In the big scheme of things, this is short term. So it helps me to helicopter up out of like the melee that I'm in and think of myself as like a 95-year-old. I do this often. This is a practice that I do on the regular. And I think of myself as 95. And I kind of place all my family, like everybody's old. Like my kids are old, their kids are old. Like we're grown and life's pretty much over. I've done all the things. And I often think, what would my 95-year-old self say to me right now? What would she say to me? What would she say to 48-year-old me at the start of 2023? What would she want me to know? What would she want me to care about? What would she want me to let go of? What would she just be like, oh, honey, lay this one down? Like, this is what's going to matter. And this isn't what is going to matter. This is what you're going to wish you chose. This is what you are going to wish you spent less time on. I think about her a lot. Like her voice of wisdom comes to me and somehow allows me to kind of pull up to the 20,000 foot view and see things a little bit more clearly. And so I'm going to do that again as I look ahead to this new year and think yet again, what do I want the long story to be here? You know, what do I hope pulls through? And then will I have like both the discipline and the courage to set aside the things that I'm pretty sure I will wish I didn't spend as much time on. And so that's the lens in which I practice.
And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's so wise. And that's the hard part because sometimes it's easy to just get fixated on those little things that in the grand scheme of things are irrelevant.
That we'll barely even remember 3 years from now. Even 3 years from now. And so like, oh, is this really worth the energy? Is this worthy of the energy? Because our energy is finite. So is our time and our attention, our affection. Everything is. It's limited. I'm learning that. And so with this limited amount, I mean, there are no more hours in a day. There's no more days in a week ever. This is it. Like, okay, with that lens, how do I want to spend it? And so that helps me. That's a decision-making grid for me that serves me well almost every time.
I love it. That's so good. So good. Jen, before we take our last break, tell our listeners what's the best place for them to find you, learn more, connect up, the books, the podcast, all the things.
Yes. You can find, I'm the only Jen Hatmaker in the world. Like, whose last name is that? So I'm Jen Hatmaker everywhere on all the socials. JenHatmaker.com is my website. My podcast is called For the Love, but you can find everything on my website. And then my books are just everywhere books are. Again, how many Jen Hatmakers have you ever heard of? I'm the one. So
they are so, so good. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and we're just going to do our wrap up questions. So sit tight. All right, Jen, I am very excited to ask you this question because, Jen Hatmaker Book Club, author and book club. So we started asking this question a couple years ago and people love it so that we actually now have a Goodreads list of the compilation of everybody. What book, and you can name a couple, I'm not going to limit you to just one book that's been really either transformational or something that you go back to that you want to share with our listeners. Like if you're going to pick up a book, pick this one up.
Oh man.
I know
it's on my desk because I reach for it so often. And like, I go back, took such copious notes inside of it that I look at my notes sometimes to remind myself. Anyway, I'm very sorry to put this in your hands, but it's Codependent No More by Melody Betty. It just changed my life. Like, this book was put into my hands right when I lost my marriage and I was having to just figure out how to live.
Mhm.
And it's brutal. It will mess you up. Like at one point I just took it and I just pitched it right on the ground. I'm like, I don't want to read one more sentence of this, not one. But I mean, like every page is like underlined and starred and circled, and
Oh my gosh.
it's wildly transformative. Now it will get all in your business.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you're not able to say everything's everybody else's fault. Like if all these people would have behaved better, then I wouldn't have this experience. This is like, what's your deal? So codependent no more.
It's
has changed my life.
I love it. I'll be buying it because selfishly I buy books from our, that's how I get my book list is from everybody.
Sure.
And I appreciate you sharing that with me. And then every episode since day one, we've asked this question to every guest. In this season of your life, where do you feel the most organized and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
Okay. In this season of my life, this is a very exciting thing to get to report, and this is a recent development in the last 2 years, I feel the most organized financially.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's big, Jen.
Yeah, I had to discover financial independence as a newly divorced single person who was absolutely in the red financially before. I didn't even know how much money I made. I didn't know what our bills were. I didn't know how many bank accounts we had, nothing. And so, I mean, this is a complete reversal for me to just be so organized, so diligent around like my financial stability and independence and future. It's amazing. It's like my favorite category now.
Is it so freeing to feel like you have a handle on that stuff? It's
unbelievable. It's so empowering. Like this is how I know anybody can learn anything. I didn't know anything. And now I just know we're capable of everything. If we want to learn it and we put our brains to it and it matters to us and we're willing to like be humble and diligent, we can. So financially, I feel the most organized. I mean, I am automated. I am locked and loaded. That feels great. And the question was, where do I feel the least organized? Is that what the other one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel the least organized in my calendar. Not surprising. This is where I struggle the most for restraint, because it's business based, it's career based, and as you know, I'm a 3.
Yeah,
and so it's very hard for me to edit. Very hard for me to delete. I always want to add. I always think I can do it. Always. I'm like, it's a lot. I'm already too full, but I know that I can do it. And the problem is I can. That is the problem.
That is one of the big things. Here's one of the secret sauces of 3s for anybody who is not like super familiar with the Enneagram. I think 3s have 2 main superpowers. Tell me if you agree with this.
Okay.
One, I think you guys are shapeshifters. You adapt in any situation and give that group what they need.
Yeah.
And it's not being inauthentic. It's just you're able to draw on different parts of your personality and show them that and just be able to show up. So I call the 3s shapeshifters. And 3s I have spent my career telling people that multitasking is a bad thing. I've spent my career doing that. I'm like, don't multitask. You need to be laser focused. And 3s are the one type people. That's it. So if you're any other number, this doesn't apply to you. 3s actually can flip and multitask. They can do a lot at once and get it all done well with execution.
Yeah, it's a bummer. That's the bummer. Like, therefore, our boundaries are harder to locate because to the detriment of our bodies, our physical health, and our relationships, we can get it done.
Yeah.
And so it is a discipline to say, this is not what's best. Anyway, I really struggle there, and I add and I add and I say yes and I say yes. And then that has not been neutral. That has had a hard effect on me and some of my relationships. And I think that'll probably be the work of my life, my adult life.
Yeah. Jen Hatmaker, thank you so much for this. It's been a pleasure and an honor and a joy to sit down and have this conversation. I'm so excited that you are speaking into our community for 2023. If you're new to our show, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Make sure to click the subscribe button. Guys, this is our 7th year. This is our crazy 7th year. So I am so excited. We're on YouTube. We're on every podcast platform. So make sure that you share this episode with your friends, somebody that needs a little bit of inspiration or encouragement as we embark on, what's yet to come. So until next week, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love and share it with your friends. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at This Organized Life Podcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, you can head on over to our website at simply the letter B like boy organized.com, which is filled with tons of resources, including free downloads, checklists, links to our amazing organizing partners, and all of our digital offerings. I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.